So I've presented at this Congress since its inception in 2012. And I think every time I've presented some form of this famous hype curve and tried to plot where we are on it each year as we go up the hype, through the hype cycle. This is this year's incarnation of that. And it's based on some experiences we at BT have had particularly over the past year, looking at how we actually move with a lot of impetus into this virtualization and cloud world. And what's becoming apparent, and I think it's been reinforced by the statements a lot of people have made at the Congress, is that NFV, let's call it classic, it's bizarre to call it classic, but there we are. NFV is actually reaching the point where it's approaching, or you can see some maturity. And so we've been looking at how we might implement that. But what's happening now, at least from my perception, is we're seeing yet another hype cycle superimposed on the original one. And that's what I call the cloudification wave. So think of it as waves of virtualization that are rolling over us. And that's creating quite a complex situation for people like us at BT who want to actually implement this technology at scale. The other thing that I've noticed, particularly at this conference, is when people talk about cloud native, particularly in the mobile core area, which is my area, they implicitly mean 5G. 5G is equivalent to a cloud core. Not quite true, and particularly for us at BT, not true, because what we see, the 5G core is very, very complex. There are a lot of issues to solve above and beyond how you deploy a cloud network. Vodafone were presenting yesterday on the service-based architecture, which is immensely complex and very new, and nothing to do with how you implement something in cloud. So you have to solve all of those problems before you have a true 5G core, and you have all of this wonderful slicing and so on. In the interim, what we see is the 4G network is growing at pace, and we have a pipeline of services that our business wants to deploy that will drive up subscriber numbers, that will drive up traffic. Where do we invest? We don't want to invest in the existing thing. We want to invest in the new thing, but we want to make that leap to this second wave of cloud technology. So what I want to talk about today is our thoughts and experiences in looking at how we deploy or move a very large, probably the largest mobile network in the UK, at scale, mission critical. In the UK, we carry the emergency services on the mobile network. Yeah, it is literally about life and death. How do you move that onto this new technology that is evolving all the time? That's the challenge. And obviously that's a big piece. There's a lot to say about that. But I think what I want to leave you with, this being a keynote, is 5 overriding themes that have emerged from our fairly intensive look at how we do this over the past year. Always remembering that this thing is very large and it's mission critical. Economics, more or less, does the business case make sense? Can you do this and realize some of the promised cost savings? The agility and the new services will come later, but it has to cost in the short to medium term. Complexity, and that comes from what I was saying about these waves of change that are rolling over us. There's a thing I call the complexity barrier, and it really does look like that when you're contemplating deploying this. It's a huge mountain of complexity that you have to get through or get over. Support and silos. As an industry, and there was a meme last year at the conference of fake virtualization. I now talk about fake cloudification. More about that in a moment. Security. It's not a bolt-on. It has to be holistic and in the foundation of whatever architecture you're deploying. And as we move forward with deploying a cloud mobile core, not everything is moving like that. There are a lot of things all around that network, integrated with it, that aren't moving as fast. And when you move, you break things. More about that in a moment. So the economics. It's all about closing this thing called the scissor curve. You know, the revenues and the costs rising further, and actually trying to bring those two curves together. We think, and we've made public announcements on this, we think that the foundation for that is to deploy a generic, open source-based infrastructure across the network. That's the platform upon which we want to build. And we've made public announcements about that, and we're rolling that forward and starting to build on it now. The key thing, and it's an interesting point, we find that having that infrastructure in place across our sites enables us to secure cost savings by being more flexible in where we put things. It's not about the things themselves necessarily being cheaper, but we can move things to where they are cheapest. Yeah, so as I come from the EE side of BT. BT acquired us about 3 years ago. And we have, irrespective of all the cloud stuff, we have a big program of rationalizing the network, rationalizing the transport, putting stuff in the right place. And having this flexible underlying cloud enables us to move pieces of the mobile core, the user plane, to where it is the most cost efficient. There are lots of savings that come from that. One other thing that we're striving for, and I believe we are being successful in, is putting the cost, the right type of cost, in the right part of the architecture. Costs come in two kinds. There's cost that is not linked to your revenue, throughput. So our subscribers are always sucking more data through the network. We don't get any more money for that. And the other type of cost is cost that's linked to your revenues. How many subscribers do you have? What we are striving to do is push those non-revenue linked costs into the infrastructure. Yeah, so as the throughput grows, you can't get away from physics. As the throughput grows, you need more stuff. But you shouldn't have to pay more for the software. So the infrastructure is where those non-revenue linked costs go, and then the software, the network function software, whatever, is where the revenue link costs go. And broadly, it is possible to achieve that split. And that's very useful because it means that going forward, as we grow, as we deploy new services, as we grow our subscriber base, yes, the software costs will grow, but that's linked to the revenues. So it's starting to close that curve. The corollary to that is we don't want to pay for software that doesn't drive revenue. This is interesting in the context of slicing. There are two types of slice. Nobody does slicing yet, but broadly there will be two types of slice. Slicing that just optimizes the architecture. MVNOs, for example. At the moment, all MVNOs are on the same network. It would be cool to slice that, put MVNOs in their own slice. There's no more revenue associated with that. You're just optimizing the architecture. So I don't want to pay for those kinds of slices. I pay for the extra subscribers I might get because I've got a better service, but I don't want to have costs associated directly with those slices, those slice types. On the other hand, obviously, if I'm turning up a slice for a particular enterprise, that's directly linked to revenue. So you have these two different types of software cost. So we believe, I mean, suppliers in general don't come from that place initially when you start conversations, but we do detect in the industry a movement towards understanding these new types of licensing models. The concern I have, and it's really a call to action for the industry, is that as we do move forward into a really true cloud-native world, this all becomes very complicated. And the kind of licensing models, and I think another speaker alluded to it yesterday, these licensing models can get very complex. The complexity barrier, I've already mentioned it, it's a huge wall of complexity that we see. So at the moment we've got these two waves crashing over us, NFV and cloud, Kubernetes and OpenStack. Do we do both? Do we do one? It's not obvious because they're all different points in the maturity cycle, really complex, and it actually is a barrier to us moving forward. Yeah, we can get through that barrier, but it's hard work and it's cost. And then we hear about other waves coming, serverless, things like that. When will it stop? And it takes us years to digest these waves. So we have to find a way to reduce this complexity. Fake virtualization, fake cloudification. I've seen very big public announcements from operators talking about they're going to cloud, but they built a cloud silo. Yeah, they have been building virtualization silos. Now they're building a cloud silo. They'll go to a partner and they'll say, build us the infrastructure, supply us the cloud native software that goes on top, but it's still a silo. We are absolutely opposed to that approach. That's why we built this generic infrastructure, but it is still hard work. It is still hard work to talk to your suppliers and get them to warrant that their software will work, to warrant that when there's an issue on the network, that you can phone them up at midnight on a Sunday and they will fix the problem. We still have that issue as an industry. Now, the CNTT initiative is hopeful in this regard, but there's still a way to go, and it is still like sand in the clockwork of us moving forward in cloud. It's always going to be simpler to fake it. Security, and I've mentioned, when you start to talk about cloud and 5G, and you talk to the security teams, and they're plural, and you say, well, we're going to cloudify everything. It's all going to be open source. And we're going to have this CI/CD pipeline that squirts software into our network and auto-deploys it. And it's going to connect to billions of IoT devices. And they say, what? Yeah, it's a real issue that as this opens up lots of new attack surfaces, lots of new vulnerabilities, lots of new possibilities for threats. You know, we're used to facing the internet and worrying about the threats coming in. Now we have the syndrome of possibly we are the threat because we've got 1 million webcams with the same password that's been compromised attached to the underside of our network. There's lots of new threats. And then some of my security colleagues were talking to me the other day, you know, this quantum thing is raising the bar on everything. So all of these concerns can really significantly impede your progress. And it breaks existing models. For example, the 3GPP in their wisdom decided that all the signaling on the service-based architecture will be encrypted. Great, very secure, except now you can't drop an optical tap in there and probe it. So I guess the message is security needs to be looked at holistically and embedded in the foundation of the architecture you're building. You can't look at it point by point. You have to build an overall framework for security. And then you can move forward, but it is still difficult. Generally, we think that hardware in the infrastructure and attestation is an emerging approach that holds a lot of hope. And things break if we move too fast. An example I like to give, and we don't have an obvious answer to this one, is if you imagine a complex network like ours, it has what I like to characterize as a shadow network sitting under and above it, linked with optical taps and all kinds of devices, and it sucks all of the control plane information out at the packet level. It can look at packet traces in the user plane, and our teams use this for critical break fix. They use it for customer experience systems. It's absolutely critical to maintaining the #1 slot that we have in the UK at the moment. Moving to cloud breaks it. I've already mentioned this, the encryption issue, but if you're in cloud, where do you put your optical tap? There is, at the moment, as far as we can see, no generic solution that enables us to do what we currently do in terms of operating the network. We can move forward, but the solutions tend to be supplier specific. So we can move forward for a certain amount of time in the medium term, but as an industry, this is an example of the kind of thing that as we move into cloud and we've got these blinkers on, but there's a lot of other stuff that is not moving to cloud at the same rate, and it's critical to the networks that we're operating. So those are the broad messages and themes that I wanted to leave you with. I guess it's, in a sense, it's a call to action for the industry, not to ignore these things or to consider these things as we look at how we apply all these wonderful technologies to large-scale and critical networks. Thank you very much.